Natalie Jenkins stumbled through the revolving doors of the Donovan Tower, juggling her portfolio, coffee, and phone while the security guard watched with amusement. She was already 15 minutes late for her meeting with the management team, and her first day as the building's new event coordinator was not going as planned. "Need a hand?" A deep voice asked as she dropped her portfolio, sending papers flying across the marble floor. "I'm fine." She insisted, crouching down to gather her materials. When she looked up, her eyes met the most striking blue gaze she'd ever seen. The man kneeling beside her, collecting her scattered papers, wore a simple button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves revealing tanned forearms. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled, and his smile made her breath catch. "First day?" he asked, handing her the gathered papers. Natalie nodded, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "That obvious, huh?" "I'm supposed to be meeting with the building management team, but I think I'm hopelessly late now." "I'm heading up that way. I can show you to the conference room," he offered, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel, by the way." "Natalie Jenkins," she replied, shaking his hand and trying to ignore the spark she felt at his touch. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." As they walked toward the elevator, Natalie couldn't help but notice how the security guard straightened up when Daniel passed by. In the elevator, she attempted small talk to calm her nerves. "So do you work in the building?" she asked. Daniel nodded, a slight smile playing at his lips. "You could say that. What brings you here as the new event coordinator?" "Well, I used to run my own small event planning business, but when I saw this position open up to manage events for the entire Donovan Tower, I couldn't pass it up. The portfolio and stability were too good to turn down," she explained, unaware that she was speaking to Daniel Donovan himself, the millionaire owner of the building and several others across the city. Daniel watched her with interest. Her enthusiasm was refreshing, and he found himself captivated by her genuine passion. Most people he met knew exactly who he was and what he was worth. Meeting someone who saw him as just another person was a rare occurrence that he found himself enjoying. "Here we are," he said as the elevator doors opened on the 32nd floor. He guided her to a large conference room where several executives sat waiting. "Miss Jenkins, welcome," said Margaret, the HR director, rising from her seat. "I see you've met Mr. Donovan." Natalie froze, her eyes widening as she turned to look at Daniel. "Mr. Donovan, as in?" "The building owner, yes," Daniel confirmed with a casual shrug, enjoying the look of shock on her face. "I was just helping Miss Jenkins find her way. I think you'll find she has some excellent ideas for the space." Natalie's face flushed crimson as the realization hit her. She just rambled about her career to the millionaire who owned not only this building but half a dozen others throughout the city. The man who was essentially her boss's boss's boss. "I'll leave you to your meeting," Daniel said, heading toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "And Miss Jenkins, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with the place." The meeting went better than Natalie could have hoped, despite her flustered state. The management team seemed impressed with her portfolio and ideas for transforming the building's underutilized common spaces into event venues. By the end of the day, she had a small office on the 30th floor and was already planning the building's annual charity gala, which was just 6 weeks away. As the weeks passed, Natalie threw herself into her work, transforming the building's event spaces and bringing new life to the corporate environment. She implemented a weekly farmers market in the lobby, organized lunch, and learned sessions for the various companies housed in the building, and spent countless hours coordinating the upcoming charity gala. Daniel found himself making excuses to visit the 30th floor, often stopping by Natalie's office under the pretense of checking on the progress of various events. What started as curiosity about the vibrant woman who'd captured his attention on her first day was quickly developing into something more. "The space looks incredible," Daniel commented one afternoon as he observed the lobby's transformation into a bustling market. Local vendors had set up booths selling everything from fresh produce to artisanal cheeses, and the normally sterile corporate environment hummed with energy. "Thank you," Natalie replied, beaming with pride. "I wanted to create a sense of community within the building. People spend so much time at work, they should enjoy the environment." Daniel nodded, admiring her vision. "You've certainly accomplished that. The tenants have nothing but praise for your initiatives." Natalie tucked her clipboard under her arm, her cheeks warming at his compliment. "That means a lot. I've been working on plans for the charity gala too. Would you like to see them?" "I'd love to," Daniel replied, following her to her office. Natalie's office was small but vibrant, much like her personality. Colorful sketches and mood boards covered the walls, and her desk was organized chaos, with fabric swatches and floral arrangement samples scattered among the paperwork. "I'm thinking of a night under the stars theme," she explained, showing him her sketches. "We can transform the rooftop garden into a celestial wonderland, with string lights and projections of constellations. The proceeds will go to the Children's Hospital, so I thought it would be meaningful to create something magical that would appeal to both the corporate donors and the children who will benefit." Daniel found himself captivated not just by her ideas, but by the passion with which she spoke. Her eyes lit up as she described her vision, and he couldn't help but smile. "It's perfect," he said. "You have a real talent for this." Natalie looked up from her sketches, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, their eyes locked, and something passed between them, something that went beyond professional admiration. The moment was broken by Margaret's arrival at the office door. "Mr. Donovan, your 3 o'clock is waiting in the boardroom." Daniel nodded, reluctantly tearing his gaze away from Natalie. "I should go, but I'm looking forward to seeing your vision come to life at the gala." After he left, Natalie sank into her chair, her heart racing. She couldn't deny the attraction she felt toward Daniel, but she reminded herself that he was essentially her employer. Getting involved with him would be complicated at best, disastrous at worst. Besides, a man like Daniel Donovan, with his wealth and status, would never be interested in someone like her. What Natalie didn't know was that Daniel was finding it increasingly difficult to keep his thoughts professional when it came to her. He dated his fair share of women from similar backgrounds, daughters of business associates, models, and socialites who were more interested in his bank account than in him as a person. Natalie was refreshingly different. She saw him as a person first, not a walking dollar sign. The night of the charity gala arrived, and Natalie was a whirlwind of activity, ensuring every detail was perfect. The rooftop garden had been transformed into a breathtaking celestial wonderland, just as she had envisioned. Star-shaped lanterns hung from the trees, and projections of constellations danced across specially erected screens. The city skyline provided a stunning backdrop to the event. Natalie herself had little time to enjoy the fruits of her labor. She was constantly moving, checking on the catering, directing the staff, and making sure the auction items were properly displayed. She'd chosen a simple midnight blue gown for the evening, elegant but practical enough to allow her to work. "You've outdone yourself," a familiar voice said from behind her. Natalie turned to find Daniel standing there, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored tuxedo. Her heart skipped a beat. "Thank you," she replied, trying to maintain her professional composure. "Everything seems to be running smoothly so far." "Too smoothly," Daniel observed. "You haven't stopped moving since the event began. Have you even had a chance to enjoy your own creation?" Natalie laughed, shaking her head. "That's not really part of the job description." "Well, I'm making it part of your job description tonight," Daniel said, offering his arm. "As your employer, I insist you take a moment to appreciate what you've accomplished. Dance with me." Natalie hesitated, aware of the curious glances from the other guests. But the warmth in Daniel's eyes and the genuine smile on his face were too tempting to resist. "Just one dance," she conceded, placing her hand on his arm. As they moved onto the dance floor, Natalie tried to ignore the whispers that followed them. Daniel Donovan rarely danced at these events, and the fact that he'd chosen the new event coordinator as his partner was certainly raising eyebrows. "Everyone's staring," she murmured as his hand settled on her waist. "Let them," Daniel replied, his voice low. "They're just jealous that I'm dancing with the most beautiful woman in the room." Natalie blushed, her gaze dropping to his chest. "You don't have to say things like that. I'm not one of your socialite dates." Daniel's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "That's exactly why I'm saying it. Because it's true, and because you won't believe me unless I tell you directly." Natalie looked up, surprised by the intensity in his eyes. For a moment she allowed herself to believe him, to imagine that there could be something real between them. The music ended all too soon, and Natalie reluctantly stepped back. "I should check on the auction," she said, her voice slightly breathless. Daniel nodded, though he clearly wished she would stay. "Don't work too hard. This is your success too. You deserve to celebrate it." The gala was a tremendous success, raising double the amount of the previous year for the Children's Hospital. As the last guests departed and the cleanup crew began their work, Natalie finally allowed herself to relax, kicking off her heels and sitting on one of the benches overlooking the city. "There you are," Daniel said, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought you might have left already." Natalie shook her head, accepting the glass he offered. "Not yet. I wanted a moment to see it all before it disappears." Daniel sat beside her, loosening his bow tie. "It was incredible, Natalie. The board is extremely impressed not just with tonight but with everything you've done since joining us." "Thank you," she said, taking a sip of champagne. "That means a lot." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, gazing at the city lights below. Natalie was acutely aware of his presence beside her, of the subtle scent of his cologne and the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "I've been thinking," Daniel said finally, turning to face her. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not as a work function or to discuss building events. Just dinner with me, Daniel, not Mr. Donovan." Natalie's heart raced. She'd been fighting her attraction to him for weeks, telling herself it was inappropriate, that he would never see her that way. But the look in his eyes now told a different story. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said softly, though everything in her wanted to say yes. "You're essentially my boss." Daniel considered this, then nodded slowly. "Technically, the building management company employs you, not me directly. But I understand your concern." He paused, then added, "What if I promise to keep business and personal entirely separate? No discussions of work, no special treatment." Natalie bit her lip, tempted by his suggestion. "People will talk. They always do," Daniel replied with a slight shrug. "I've learned to ignore it. The question is, can you?" Natalie looked at him, at the hope in his eyes and the genuine smile that made her heart flutter. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." Daniel's smile widened. "Great. I'll pick you up at 7. The following evening, Natalie spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing her outfit, finally settling on a simple emerald green dress that complemented her auburn hair and fair skin. When Daniel arrived at her modest apartment, she was surprised to see him in jeans and a casual button-down rather than his usual business attire. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes appreciative as they took in her appearance. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling overdressed. "Should I change? I wasn't sure where we were going." Daniel shook his head. "Absolutely not. You're perfect, and where we're going you'll fit right in." To Natalie's surprise, Daniel drove them to a small, family-owned Italian restaurant in a part of the city she rarely visited. It was charming and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. The owner greeted Daniel like an old friend, leading them to a secluded table in the back. "I come here whenever I can," Daniel explained as they settled in. "The food is incredible, and no one bothers me about business or asks for investment opportunities over tiramisu." Natalie laughed, relaxing as she saw this different side of him. "It's lovely, not what I expected though." "Let me guess," Daniel said, his eyes twinkling. You thought I'd take you to some overpriced rooftop restaurant where a single appetizer costs more than a week's grocery bill, Natalie blushed, caught. Maybe. I save those places for business meetings, Daniel admitted. When I'm with someone I actually want to talk to, I prefer somewhere I can hear them without straining over ambient electronic music. The evening flew by as they talked about everything except work. Natalie learned that Daniel had built his real estate empire from a single property he'd purchased with money saved from working construction jobs through college. He learned about her upbringing in a small town, her passion for creating experiences for people, and her dream of someday opening an event space of her own. "Why haven't you?" Daniel asked as they shared a dessert. "Opened your own venue, I mean," Natalie sighed. "Money, mainly. Commercial real estate in this city is outrageously expensive, and banks aren't eager to loan to someone with my limited collateral. Plus, there's the risk. I have student loans to pay off and my mother's medical bills. It just hasn't been the right time." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Risk is scary, but sometimes it's worth it. As he drove her home, Natalie found herself wishing the evening wouldn't end. When they reached her apartment, Daniel walked her to her door, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. "I had a wonderful time," she said, turning to face him. "So did I," Daniel replied, his voice soft. He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to do this again?" Natalie's heart fluttered. "I would, very much." Daniel smiled, then leaned forward, his intentions clear. Natalie closed her eyes as his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that held the promise of more. When they parted, she was breathless, her cheeks flushed. "Good night, Natalie," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Good night, Daniel," she replied, reluctantly stepping into her apartment and closing the door. Over the next few weeks, they continued to see each other, carefully keeping their professional and personal lives separate. At work, they maintained a respectful distance, though Natalie occasionally caught Daniel watching her with a warmth in his eyes that made her blush. Outside of work, they discovered a deep connection that went beyond physical attraction. Natalie introduced Daniel to the simple pleasures he'd missed while building his business empire: weekend markets, community festivals, and cozy bookstore cafes. In turn, Daniel showed her parts of the city she'd never experienced, from hidden art galleries to spectacular viewpoints accessible only to those who knew where to look. But as their relationship deepened, complications arose. Rumors began to circulate throughout the building about the nature of their relationship. Some suggested Natalie had used her position to get close to Daniel for his money, while others implied she'd been given her job because of their connection. "Don't let it bother you," Daniel advised when he found her distressed after overhearing comments in the elevator. "People always want to believe the worst." "But it does bother me," Natalie admitted. "I've worked hard to build a professional reputation. I don't want people thinking I got where I am because of who I'm dating." Daniel understood her concern, but he was less affected by the rumors. He'd spent his entire career dealing with people who made assumptions about him based on his wealth. Natalie, however, was new to this level of scrutiny. The situation came to a head when Natalie was passed over for coordinating a high-profile conference that would have been perfect for her portfolio. When she inquired why, her direct supervisor mentioned concerns about potential conflicts of interest. That evening, Natalie arrived at Daniel's penthouse apartment visibly upset. "I can't do this anymore," she said as soon as he opened the door. "My career is suffering because of our relationship." Daniel guided her to the sofa, his brow furrowed with concern. "What happened?" Natalie explained the situation, her voice quivering with frustration. "I love being with you, Daniel, but I can't sacrifice everything I've worked for. Maybe we need to take a step back." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. The thought of losing her made his chest tighten painfully. In the months they'd been together, Natalie had become essential to his happiness in a way no one else ever had. "What if there was another solution?" he asked finally. "What if you didn't have to choose between your career and us?" Natalie looked at him questioningly. What do you mean? You told me once that your dream was to open your own event venue, Daniel said, an idea forming. What if I helped make that happen? Natalie's eyes widened. Daniel, I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering, he clarified. Not as a handout, but as an investment. In you, in your talent. You've proven what you can do with the Donovan Tower events. Imagine what you could create with a space that's entirely your vision. Natalie shook her head, torn between desire for her dream and fear of what others would think. People would still say I'm using you for your money. Let them, Daniel said firmly. We know the truth, and eventually your success will speak for itself. He took her hands in his. Natalie, I'm falling in love with you. I don't want to lose you over rumors and office politics. Natalie's breath caught at his words. You're falling in love with me, Daniel smiled, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm pretty sure I fell the day you dropped your portfolio in the lobby. I just didn't want to scare you off by saying it too soon. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes, but they were tears of joy. I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted. That's why this is so hard. Daniel pulled her close, his arms enveloping her in warmth. Then let's find a way to make this work, together. Over the next few days, they discussed possibilities. Natalie was hesitant to accept financial help, but Daniel proposed a compromise. He would provide the initial investment for her event venue, but it would be structured as a proper business loan with clear terms. She would maintain full creative control, and his name wouldn't appear anywhere in the business documents. It would be her achievement, not a gift from him. While Natalie considered the offer, she continued her work at the Donovan Tower, determined to prove her worth regardless of her personal relationship. She poured her energy into planning a series of community workshops that would open the building to the surrounding neighborhood, fostering goodwill and positive press. Daniel, meanwhile, quietly investigated potential properties that might suit Natalie's vision. He found an old warehouse in an up-and-coming area of the city, a space with character and potential that was being sold at a reasonable price due to its need for renovation. I want to show you something, he told her one Saturday morning, picking her up in his car. No pressure, just an idea. When they arrived at the warehouse, Natalie was initially skeptical. The exterior was weathered with faded brick and boarded windows. But as Daniel led her inside, she began to see the possibilities. High ceilings with exposed beams, a spacious open floor plan, and large windows that would flood the space with natural light once uncovered. It needs work, Daniel acknowledged as they walked through the dusty interior. But structurally, it's sound. And the location is perfect, close enough to downtown to attract corporate events, but in a neighborhood with character for weddings and community gatherings. Natalie walked the space slowly, her mind already envisioning what it could become. Industrial chic was popular for event venues, and the warehouse's original features would be a selling point, not a detriment. What do you think? Daniel asked, watching her face closely. It's perfect, Natalie admitted, her voice soft with wonder. But can I really do this? It's such a huge step. Daniel approached her, taking both her hands in his. You can. I believe in you, Natalie. You've got the vision, the talent, and the drive. I'm just providing the opportunity, you'll do the rest. Natalie looked around the space once more, then back at Daniel. The love and confidence in his eyes gave her courage. Okay, she said finally. Let's do it. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Natalie gave notice at the Donovan Tower, explaining to the management team that she was pursuing her dream of opening her own venue. While some were surprised, many congratulated her, having seen firsthand what she was capable of creating. Daniel kept his involvement in her new venture discreet, providing advice when asked, but otherwise stepping back to let Natalie take the lead. She hired contractors, designed the space, and developed a comprehensive business plan. By the time renovations were complete, Starlight Warehouse was already generating buzz in the local event planning community. The grand opening was a testament to Natalie's vision. She transformed the industrial space into an enchanted garden for the night, with hanging greenery, twinkling lights, and flowing fabrics softening the brick and steel. Local vendors, many of whom she'd worked with during her time at the Donovan Tower, provided food and entertainment. As guests mingled and admired the space, Daniel found Natalie in a quiet corner, watching her dream come to life with tears of joy in her eyes. "Proud of yourself?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Overwhelmed," she admitted, leaning into him. "I can't believe this is real." "Believe it," Daniel said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You did this, Natalie. Your talent, your vision, I just provided the canvas." Natalie turned to face him, her heart full of love for this man who had believed in her when she doubted herself. "Thank you for pushing me to take the risk." "For believing in me, always," Daniel promised. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I have something for you, a grand opening gift." He pulled out a small velvet box, and Natalie's breath caught. When he opened it, inside was a delicate silver key on a chain. "It's a key to the venue," he explained as she looked at it questioningly. "The first key, actually. I wanted you to have something to remember this night, the moment your dream became reality." Natalie's eyes filled with tears as she turned around, allowing him to fasten the necklace around her neck. "It's perfect," she whispered, touching the key where it rested against her skin. "There's something else," Daniel said, his voice suddenly nervous. He reached into his other pocket and withdrew a second, smaller box. "I was going to wait, but seeing you tonight, seeing what you've created, I don't want to wait anymore." Natalie's heart raced as he dropped to one knee, oblivious to the guests who had begun to notice and fall silent. "Natalie Jenkins," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes, "you walked into my building and changed everything. You saw me for who I am, not what I own. You've brought joy and purpose into my life, and I can't imagine a future without you in it. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a stunning yet tasteful diamond ring, sparkling in the twinkling lights of the venue. Natalie's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Around them, guests had gone completely silent, waiting for her response. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course yes." The venue erupted in applause as Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to his feet, pulling her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. 1 year later, Starlight Warehouse was thriving, booked solid for months in advance. Natalie had hired a small staff to help manage the growing business, allowing her to focus on the creative aspects she loved most. She and Daniel had married in a simple ceremony at the venue, surrounded by friends and family who celebrated not just their love, but the journey that had brought them together. As they stood on the rooftop of the Donovan Tower on their first anniversary, overlooking the city where their story had begun, Natalie reflected on how much had changed. "Penny for your thoughts," Daniel said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about that first day when I dropped my portfolio in the lobby," Natalie replied, leaning back against his chest. "If I'd been on time, we might never have met." Daniel chuckled. "I'm fairly certain I would have found a reason to meet the beautiful woman transforming my building. Some things are meant to be." Natalie turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. "I love you, Daniel Donovan." "And I love you, Natalie Donovan," he replied, lowering his lips to hers as the city lights twinkled below, stars in their own private universe.